Lake Effect brings you conversations about what's happening in Milwaukee and the people, places, and organizations that shape our community. This is Lake Effect Spotlight from WUWM, Milwaukee's NPR.
Milwaukee's Youth Poet Laureate knows how intimidating it can be to put a pen to paper. Aleena Ahmed was selected by Woodland Pattern last summer to help students overcome that fear and spark creative writing. Lake Effect's Excret Nunez spoke with Ahmed about what inspired her love of poetry and her experience as Youth Poet Laureate.
I want to start by taking it back to the beginning. Where does your love for creative writing and passion for poetry stem from?
I think I've always had a really strong passion for storytelling above all. My mother likes to tell everybody stories about how I used to have these ideas and these stories and these things that I wanted to have down on paper before I could even write. So I would just like come home from the beach and tell her what I did, and she would write it down for me. I was very fortunate to grow up in a household that loved literature. So I always grew up hearing my mother talk about the books that she adored and my brother talk about the things that he wrote and have me read some of his work as well.
And do you feel like there was a moment that stands out to you where you realized this is what I want to do? Like, this is what I want to pursue?
No, I think there's so many moments, you know? Like, I think it's every moment I shared with my brother, looking over what he wrote and reminiscing over our memories together and having it being, captured so beautifully and artistically in such detail and having that memory with me forever. Or whether it's, I can think of a lot of memories I have while I was performing and just feeling really energized and sort of empowered by the themes that I was able to express and the way I was able to convey my ideas, or just being able to sort of bond with a lot of my friends over the things that we write about and sort of like nerd over, like, oh my God, like I learned how to do this and this is really cool. So I think it's just a lot of memories over the years.
Yeah, I'm getting like a sense of nostalgia and
Yeah.
community.
Yeah. I think it's just also because I've just always loved, like talking, communicating, storytelling. So it's, in a way, yeah, there's so many memories.
Yeah, I like to say, I don't know if it's a gift, but I say the gift of gab. Or
Yes, yes, yes.
I'm a yapper.
Oh my God. My friends say that I should go D1 in yapping.
Not
Yeah.
D1.
Yeah, yeah,
So I also understand that you have an appreciation of art in various forms, but what do you love most about poetry that keeps you connected to it?
I think poetry has the ability to just capture emotions and ideas in a way that's so accurate and so personal in a way that prose can't. And I think because of that, it has this really unique capacity to connect people together. There have been times where I will be reading the work of somebody else or I'll be hearing the work from somebody else and it just strikes me like right in the heart and I'm just in awe of what I just heard because of how personal it is. I think that's why it's so important.
And the emotion,
Yes, the
too.
emotion, 100%. I think because like you're able to use so many different like literary techniques and like it's so precise and it's so specific and it's so interpretational, and that way I think all the time everybody has something to gain from a poem because it means something different for everybody.
So, do you feel like there's anything in particular that influences your work?
Yeah, I think for me, it's definitely my culture and my upbringing, 100%. It always shows up in my work in some way, shape, or form, whether it's the sense I grew up with or the environment I grew up with, the nature, the flowers, like any part of my culture, somehow it just always creeps up into my work.
Can you like elaborate on that?
hmm So I have always liked to write, but it's been really back and forth. In eighth grade or around middle school is when I got a little bit more serious with it and I started really sitting down and started honing into my craft. And I remember I wrote this one poem about sort of like generational cycles and like I was talking about like my immigrant parents and the strength that comes with that. And I was always using nature. I was always talking about Bengali flowers, so like a dolon chapa or a nilkamal, or I was getting really specific into these, what I was surrounded with, I guess, because I've lived in both Bangladesh and America. And I think some of my fondest moments or like memories are from Bangladesh, where I see all these, all the flowers that I grew up with and the cooking and the smell and everything.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that with me. You became Milwaukee's 2024-2025 Youth Poet Laureate in May. Why did you decide to apply to this program?
I think I was just really interested in becoming a better writer and also learning about other writers as well and figuring out, well, how can I make an impact? Like, how can I utilize what I do to help bring to light, certain social issues that maybe people haven't heard about before? Or how can I help other people reach their artistic potential as well? And I think in school, I help run our creative writing club where I've always hosted a lot of workshops, and that was just always my favorite part, was just teaching people how better to express themselves and tap into maybe a part of themselves they haven't really seen or thought of before through writing and through art. So I just was looking to do that at a greater capacity, I guess.
Yeah, so do you feel like you've done that so far, or what are some of the things that you've done as Youth Poet Laureate?
Yeah, so far I was a student intern at Woodland Pattern's poetry camp, and that was a really, really I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed that. I really enjoyed the sort of, like I like the workshopping and the helping students on like one-to-one, offering feedback and looking through their work and seeing just how diverse poetry can be. It's definitely going to be one of the highlights of the laureateship for this year.
And so I imagine you probably saw the students grow too.
Oh, yeah. It was very, very fulfilling to sort of help them navigate through that journey and figure out, because again, writing is so personal. Everybody brings their own sort of energy and enthusiasm and technique and story to it, like no matter where you come from. So it was really interesting to see people figure out like what clicks for them, what works for them, what expresses one piece in a particular way.
Yeah. What are some other things that you've done so far?
Yeah, so most recently I performed at Milwaukee Scores alongside Dasha Kelly Hamilton, who is the founder of the program, which was really, really nice. I always love performing and sharing my work, whether it's sort of based on something social impact related or just sharing a piece of my soul. And a couple weeks ago, I also performed at the Brunch Raiser alongside Juan Felipe Herrera. And I actually had a really nice conversation with him where we bonded over our love of psychology, I guess, and just, the impact poetry can have on people like mentally, which was really nice. But performing is always one of my favorite parts of writing, always, and just being able to share and connect with people in that way as well.
Absolutely. And something that you mentioned earlier too is I know as part of this program, you work to highlight social justice programs, such as the Vel R. Phillips Juvenile Justice Center. Can you tell me more about the project you're working on with them?
Yeah, of course. So currently we are collaborating with the Velar Phillips School and the Juvenile Justice Center to fundraise and collect books for their library. We're going to do that through Woodland Pattern's Poetry Marathon, which is the biggest annual fundraiser, and it's going to be held hybrid for the first time ever. It's going to be at the St. Kate Hotel on the 25th of January, and we're going to be raising money through our poetry hour and the sort of sponsorship that we gain from that. I will be reading alongside Emily Aguike, who was the first Milwaukee Youth Poet Laureate, and we're going to be reuniting with former poetry camp students, so it's going to be really exciting for sure.
So you mentioned earlier that you really enjoyed working with students of the Woodland Pattern Poetry Camp. How would you advise other young creative students, such as yourself, to get started in writing poetry?
My favorite thing that I'm always excited to sort of teach or like host a workshop in, or like whenever I get the opportunity, is I try to sort of work through the idea of like writer's block, whether it's like in school or anything. Like I always try to weave that in somehow because I feel like it's the biggest thing that writers struggle with. And for a long time, it was the biggest thing that I struggled with was sort of these really perfectionistic and sort of self-restricting thoughts that held me back from getting something really productive and valuable onto the paper. Because the way writer's block works is you're trying to edit and draft at the same time when those should be two separate processes. And I think oftentimes that really just inhibits me from getting something down on paper that could be productive. So I think the message I would have and the sort of advice I would give is to just be welcoming with yourself and freeing with yourself and to not restrict yourself. Like whatever comes out will come out. And something my brother always told me growing up was like, well, you can't edit an empty page because he knew that was something I struggled with as well. So
Yeah, no, I totally relate to that. I felt like you were preaching, and I relate. So, well, now that you mention it and how you work to overcome writer's block, I'm interested in learning how you craft a poem. What's that process like for you?
well, it can be different. It can be really, really spontaneous. Sometimes I just look at something and I just feel an urge to capture it. I'm just like, I have to get this down in some way. I think I just tend to find poetry in places that maybe you wouldn't expect at first. I find in conversation constantly, I'm like talking with my friends and I'm like, oh, that's kind of poetic. And they're like, what do you mean? And I'm like, no, there's something there. Like there's a prompt in there. There's some theme that I can connect or some motif I can make. And that's the thing about poetry is it can come from anywhere at any time
In unexpected ways.
in unexpected ways for sure.
So, I understand that you have a poem of yours you'd like to share. So, please go ahead.
So this is called Turmeric Stains, and it's my favorite poem right now because I wrote this about sort of love across space and time, and it has this sort of duality of just like being frozen in time, and it's like limiting and not limiting, and it's kind of like bittersweet. So, you used to stand still, pinned to the earth like rock amongst waves, spindled with salt that burn against wound, and yet you left yours open, colliding with minerals centuries old under the bleeding sun. Rays dispersed into shards of crystal turn infinitesimally small between my feet and spill into a melange of saffron and paprika across air as I breathe in the years between us that inched us separate, inched me further. Allow the turmeric beneath my nails to dissipate under warmth, lift under light, and question its existence in your presence. This bay turns balm, thick and solid amidst movement but not yours. You melt an eternity of motion into this frozen space I wish could stay still forever.
That was beautiful. Aleena, thank you so much for speaking with me today and for sharing some advice and your really impactful poetry with me.
Thank you so much for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Aleena Ahmed is a junior at Nicolet High School and is Milwaukee's Youth Poet Laureate. She spoke with Lake Effect's Excret Nunez. Milwaukee County High School freshmen, sophomores, and juniors have until March 30th to apply to be Milwaukee's next Youth Poet Laureate. You can find more information about that at wuwm.com.
You can find more interviews like this one by visiting wuwm.com/Lake Effect. And while you're there, subscribe to the Lake Effect Spotlight podcast.